Book 4, Chapter 1 of the late Mr. Jonathan Wild the Great. This recording is in the public domain. Read by Dennis Sayers. The late Mr. Jonathan Wild the Great by Henry Fielding. Book 4, Chapter 1. Sentiment of the Ordinaries, were they to be written in letters of gold. A very extraordinary instance of folly in Friendly, and a dreadful accident which befell our hero. Heartfree had not been long in Newgate before his frequent conversation with his children, and other instances of a good heart which betrayed themselves in his actions and conversation, created an opinion in all about him that he was one of the silliest fellows in the universe. The Ordinary himself, a very sagacious as well as very worthy person, declared that he was a cursed rogue, but no conjurer. What indeed might induce the former, that is, the roguish part of this opinion in the Ordinary, was a wicked sentiment which Heartfree one day disclosed in conversation, and which we, who are truly orthodox, will not pretend to justify, that he believed a sincere Turk would be saved. To this the good man, with becoming zeal and indignation, answered, I know not what may become of a sincere Turk, but if this be your persuasion, I pronounce it impossible you should be saved. No, sir, so far from a sincere Turk's being within the pale of salvation, neither will any sincere Presbyterian, Anabaptist, nor Quaker whatever be saved. But neither did the one nor the other part of this character prevail on Friendly to abandon his old master. He spent his whole time with him, except only those hours when he was absent for his sake, in procuring evidence for him against his trial, which was now shortly to come on. Indeed, this young man was the only comfort, besides a clear conscience, and the hopes beyond the grave, which this poor wretch had; for the sight of his children was one of those alluring pleasures which men, in some diseases, indulge themselves often fatally in, which at once flatter and heighten their malady. Friendly being one day present while Heartfree was, with tears in his eyes, embracing his eldest daughter, and lamenting the hard fate to which he feared he should be obliged to leave her, spoke to him thus: I have long observed with admiration the magnanimity with which you go through your own misfortunes, and the steady countenance with which you look on death. I have observed that all your agonies arise from the thoughts of parting with your children, and of leaving them in a distressed condition. Now, though I hope all your fears will prove ill grounded, yet, that I may relieve you as much as possible from them, be assured that, as nothing can give me more real misery than to observe so tender and loving a concern in a master, to whose goodness I owe so many obligations, and whom I so sincerely love, so nothing can afford me equal pleasure with my contributing to lessen or to remove it. Be convinced, therefore, if you can place any confidence in my promise, that I will employ my little fortune, which you know to be not entirely inconsiderable, in the support of this your little family. Should any misfortune, which I pray Heaven avert, happen to you before you have better provided for these little ones, I will be myself their father, nor shall either of them ever know distress, if it be any way in my power to prevent it. Your younger daughter I will provide for, And as for my little prattler, your elder, as I never yet thought of any woman for a wife, I will receive her as such at your hands, nor will I ever relinquish her for another." Heartfree flew to his friend and embraced him with raptures of acknowledgment. He vowed to him that he had eased every anxious thought of his mind but one, and that he must carry with him out of the world. "O Friendly," cried he, "it is my concern for that best of women, whom I hate myself for ever having censured in my opinion. O Friendly, thou didst know her goodness, yet sure her perfect character none but myself was ever acquainted with. She had every perfection, both of mind and body, which heaven hath indulged to her whole sex, and possessed all in a higher excellence than nature ever indulged to another in any single virtue. Can I bear the loss of such a woman? Can I bear the apprehensions of what mischiefs that villain may have done to her, of which death is perhaps the lightest?" Friendly gently interrupted him as soon as he saw any opportunity, endeavouring to comfort him on this head likewise, by magnifying every circumstance which could possibly afford any hopes of his seeing her again. By this kind of behaviour, in which the young man exemplified so uncommon an height of friendship, he had soon obtained in the castle the character of as odd and silly a fellow as his master. Indeed, they were both the byword, laughing stock, and contempt of the whole place. The sessions now came on at the Old Bailey. The grand jury at Hickes Hall had found the bill of indictment against Heartfree, and on the second day of the session he was brought to his trial, where, notwithstanding the utmost efforts of Friendly and the honest old female servant, the circumstances of the fact corroborating the evidence of Fireblood, as well as that of Wild, who counterfeited the most artful reluctance at appearing against his old friend Heartfree, the jury found the prisoner guilty. Wild had now accomplished his scheme, for as to what remained, it was certainly unavoidable, seeing that Wild was entirely void of interest, and was besides convicted on a statute the infringers of which could hope no pardon. The catastrophe to which our hero had reduced this wretch was so wonderful an effort of greatness that it probably made Fortune envious of her own darling; but whether it was from this envy, or only from that known inconstancy and weakness so often and judiciously remarked in that lady's temper, who frequently lifts men to the summit of greatness, only ut lapsu graviore cruant, certain it is she now began to meditate mischief against Wild, who seems to have come to that period at which all heroes have arrived, and which she was resolved they never should transcend. In short, there seems to be a certain measure of mischief and iniquity which every man is to fill up, and then Fortune looks on him of no more use than a silkworm whose bottom is spun, and deserts him. Mr. Blueskin was convicted the same day of robbery by our hero, an unkindness which, though he had drawn on himself and necessitated him to, he took greatly amiss. As Wild, therefore, was standing near him, with that disregard and indifference which great men are too carelessly inclined to have for those whom they have ruined, Blueskin privily drawing a knife, thrust the same into the body of our hero with such violence that all who saw it concluded he had done his business. And indeed, had not fortune, not so much out of love to our hero as from a fixed resolution to accomplish a certain purpose, of which we have formerly given a hint, carefully placed his guts out of the way, he must have fallen a sacrifice to the wrath of his enemy, which, as he afterwards said, he did not deserve. For had he been contented to have robbed, and only submitted to give him the booty, he might have still continued safe and unimpeached in the gang. But so it was that the knife, missing noble parts, the noblest of many, the guts, perforated only the hollow of his belly, and caused no other harm than an immoderate effusion of blood, of which, though it at present weakened him, he soon after recovered. This accident, however, was in the end attended with worse consequences, for as very few people, those greatest of all men, absolute princes excepted, attempt to cut the thread of human life, like the feudal sisters, merely out of wantonness and for their diversion, but rather by so doing propose to themselves the acquisition of some future good, or the avenging some past evil; and as the former of these motives did not appear probable, it put inquisitive persons on examining into the latter. Now, as the vast schemes of Wild, when they were discovered, however great in their nature, seemed to some persons, like the projects of most other such persons, rather to be calculated for the glory of the great man himself than to redound to the general good of society, designs began to be laid by several of those who thought it principally their duty to put a stop to the future progress of our hero; and a learned judge, particularly a great enemy to this kind of greatness, procured a clause in an act of parliament, a trap for Wild, which he soon after fell into. By this law it was made capital in a prig to steal with the hands of other people; a law so plainly calculated for the destruction of all priggish greatness, that it was indeed impossible for our hero to avoid it. End of Book 4, Chapter 1. Read by Dennis Sayers in Modesto, California, for LibriVox.